My name is Maria Keeney, and on behalf of UCD Smurfit Executive Development, I'm delighted to welcome you here this morning for our webinar on purpose and executive presence with my colleague Stephen Boyle. For those of you who don't know, Stephen Boyle is Programme Director of our Diploma in Advanced Management Performance and our short course winning negotiation strategies. He's also a lecturer and trainer in the fields of personal impact and performance, negotiation and influencing, and decision making. He's delivered workshops all over the world, including Europe, Asia, and the United States. And prior to becoming a lecturer and trainer almost 20 years ago, Stephen had roles in management consulting and in communication and change management at a Fortune 500 company. I'm going to join you again at the end to ask Stephen any questions that you have. So please do include them in the chat button at the bottom throughout the lecture, and I can ask Stephen as many as possible at the end. I'll also briefly discuss our Diploma in Advanced Management Performance for any of you that are interested, and I can answer any questions you have as well. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Stephen, and I'll speak to you again at the end. Thanks so much. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Maria, and a very warm hello and Happy New Year to everybody. In fact, we couldn't have picked not just a more appropriate time of year, but a more appropriate date for this webinar, the end of the second week of January. According to research by fitness tracking app Strava over the last few years, this is pretty much exactly the date. The last couple of years, it's been around the Friday of the second week of January, on which a majority of people fail their New Year's resolutions. Welcome to Quitter's Day. Well, that applies to exercise goals. Obviously, that's what Strava's looking at. But research by the University of Scranton in Pennsylvania looked at a broader range of resolutions and found that 80% of people have dropped them by February. And in fact, only 8% of people they studied achieved any of their goals. So that's something of a sobering thought. Now, well-established goal setting and motivation theories already provide us with lots of suggestions that we could use to increase the chances of achieving our goals. For example, we could set realistic, concrete goals. We could set SMART objectives. We could link our new behaviors to existing habits. We could establish appropriate rewards for achieving specific milestones. And there's a whole load of other things that we could do. And as I work in a business school, obviously I'm particularly interested in people's business and career related goals. But if you're thinking that perhaps we approach or treat our business, our workplace, our career goals differently and we're better at achieving them, perhaps you should think again. Research by an MIT Sloan Management Review article by Grenny, Maxfield, and Schimberg showed that whether leaders were trying to influence major organizational change or affect bad habits that their teams or organizations had developed, or influence their own personal unhealthy habits, they encountered the same challenges and setbacks along the way. So my message so far is, if you've already set goals for 2021, I want you to put them on pause. And if you haven't, I don't want you to set those goals, or at least I don't want you to set them just yet. Now, it's not all bad news. Most of us have been under lockdown for the majority of the past year, on and off at least, and our lives have been in some ways put on hold. And in fact, this can be a time that people can reflect and perhaps establish some new habits. So I'm hoping that you have had the opportunity to establish some new healthy habits or achieve some goals. And we'd all like to think that perhaps we have some good habits now that we'd like to maintain. However, of course, sometimes the good comes with the bad. And Wendy Wood, a professor of psychology and business at the University of Southern California, who's the author of a book titled Good Habits, Bad Habits, studying this exactly, predicts quite worryingly that once our lives begin to return to some of the pre-lockdown patterns that we had, if those patterns are largely established, our old habits will reestablish themselves and new habits will die off unless we take steps to preserve them. Moreover, I think it would be naive to look at lockdown and that period as a period largely of personal growth and achievement, because for most people, we've been struggling with the stresses of working from home. Many also have the issue of having kids at home to school. Many others have been furloughed or laid off. So the general experience for people has been tough, with studies showing that a majority of people have experienced increased stress, anxiety, tiredness, boredom, lack of motivation. For many, lockdowns have piled on the stress as well as the COVID kilo. On top of all that, even before lockdown, before you ever heard of COVID-19 or knew what a coronavirus was, we already had an epidemic that hasn't gone away. In fact, it's almost certainly got worse. And this is an epidemic that has been defined by the World Health Organization as the epidemic of the 21st century: stress. And this is brought about in part because of the pressure we feel to do more yoga, make more homemade meals, get fitter or more ripped, get a better job, get the latest tech gadget, get a new car, get that promotion. All of this pressure is a perfect storm for burnout. And it's whipped up even more by the unrealistic lives depicted on social media and the expectations that they form. So it's no surprise that burnout is no longer something we necessarily think of as the preserve of stressed out middle-aged and middle or senior ranking executives, that the millennial generation has been labeled the burnout generation. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing more yoga or eating more healthily or advancing your career or seeking that promotion, if that's the right thing for you. But I firmly believe that that's where part of the problem lies, that we're led by these messages, including messaging coming from self-help gurus, to do more of this, be more flexible about that, enhance your career this way, that way, or the other. Increasingly, the internet, social media, from all sides, we're bombarded with these messages. And all of these things could be good for us. But the question is, they're good for us if they're right for us. But there's everything wrong with pursuing these things if they're not right for us. And if you don't have an underlying strong sense of purpose, you're bombarded with messages, you're pursuing them, you feel you don't know where to go, and so anything will do. And you will likely fail to achieve your goals and stress yourself out even further in the process. And that's why my message is to start your year with purpose. Purpose is the secret to achieving your goals. It's something of an open secret, yet how many people can actually say what their purpose is? It's a big question, probably the biggest question in life. Why are we here? And yet having a purpose not only leads to the achievement of goals, exceptional performance, it actually also provides a measurable boost in well-being. And I'm not just talking about wellness, that vague phrase that's so often trotted out as the reason we should be pursuing the latest thing that health gurus or self-help gurus are telling us we should do. There's solid medical research evidence for this claim. Research by a US-Canadian team conducted over a 14-year period found that people who lived their lives with a stronger sense of purpose lived longer and healthier lives than people who did not. Specifically, what these people were doing was setting big goals that directed their day-to-day activities and that were deeply connected to what their purpose was. And that's what I want you to do. In fact, in the Diploma of Advanced Management Performance that Maria has mentioned, the final module that I deliver, which is called Personal Impact and Presence, is all about finding your purpose, rooting in that, and giving you a framework. And today I want to give you part of that framework and show you how you can go about trying to find your purpose. I can't tell you what it is, but how you can go about trying to find it, and show you a framework for establishing and achieving those big goals. Now, another study at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, is one I was reading about in recent days because it struck me as particularly relevant. When I looked over the participant list for this webinar, we have a very, very diverse range of participants, from senior executives right down to actually quite a few of our students at the business school. And this study struck me as quite relevant because it found that our search for purpose in life follows a kind of U-curve, a U-shape, as we age. So in young adulthood and into our 20s, and for some in their 30s, the drive to find purpose is very, very strong. We're struggling to make decisions around education, careers, other choices in personal life as well. And these choices dominate a period of anxiety while people are searching for some kind of meaning. And that anxiety and that drive to find purpose tends to start to dampen down if people's lives settle, which they tend to in middle age, and as people get into their 30s and 40s, as decisions have been made. It doesn't mean that those decisions have necessarily been purposeful, because many people haven't really found that purpose, or the purpose, the decisions have been driven for them. They've been either made by unconscious and not necessarily purpose-driven choices, or they've been made by others. And anyway, as our lives get occupied with career and family, we don't necessarily feel such a need for purpose. That doesn't mean that we found our true purpose. But as people start to approach retirement and then into retirement, that drive for purpose goes back up. So people start to wonder what their meaning is. Many find that they're going to fall off a cliff when they get to retirement because suddenly their raison d'etre, their job, is gone. That study showed that at all ages of life, when people are struggling to find meaning, including if they're still doing so or they don't have an underlying meaning in middle age, this is associated with poorer health, less effective brain function, whereas a sense of purpose is aligned with greater contentment in life and better physical and mental health. This is echoed by other studies and experts. The Dr. Philip Muskin, who's a professor of psychiatry with the Columbia University Medical Center in New York, who says that if a person can't find meaning in their job, that's likely to make them unhappy. They won't necessarily be depressed, but they'll be uncomfortable in life. And that discomfort effectively means, well, this quote describes it all. They go to their graves with their music still inside them unplayed. So, do I have your attention now? Is your life driven by purpose, or is it drifting without it? Is your music being played loud and clear? Now, if you feel that you have drifted from your purpose, or that you could do with strengthening that sense of purpose, then this may be a sobering thought, but it doesn't have to be depressing, because anyone can take practical steps to find their sense of purpose and imbue what they do with meaning. You could find a sense of purpose just around the corner, or to extend the metaphor I want to use, it could even be right where you're standing. So what is purpose? Who you are, what makes you distinctive. It's not what you do, how you do it, and why. The strengths and passions you bring to the table. So in the module I referred to, I asked people to develop this purpose, to articulate it. And it can be very varied. And this is in line with those medical studies that show it actually doesn't really matter what those people's purpose is. It's if they have a strong sense of purpose. That sense of purpose is what really makes the difference for them. Nobody, including me, can tell you what your purpose should be or give you an easy formula for finding it. but I can point you in the direction you should go in. In fact, there are two paths. Now, the first path is the easier one to follow, and it's a good idea to follow this path. And it's to find purpose in where you are and in what you're doing right now, or indeed in what you want to do, in your job, your interests, your course of study, your family, your plans for your health. This is definitely the easier path. It's not always going to be easy, especially if you're trying to find purpose in the goals that you feel are right for you. The second path, the more difficult path, is to reflect more deeply on what your overarching purpose is, to figure out who you are and why you're here, to try and answer that big question, to find an enduring, though not necessarily permanent, definition of your purpose. So to summarize, the first path is about finding purpose in what you do. The second path, it's subtly different, but it is a big difference, is finding your purpose. But the metaphor of two paths isn't quite perfect. We can't take this metaphor too far. If you're out for a walk or a hike and you come across a fork like this, you've got to take one path. But in fact, in trying to find our purpose, we can take both simultaneously, and that's actually what I recommend. Because for most people, the first path will not only be easier to navigate, finding purpose in what you do, and lead to more immediate results, but it will also actually lead to greater satisfaction and performance in what you do. Now, I still urge you to take the second path as well, to try and find overall what your purpose is, because if you only take that first path, finding purpose in what you do, it may not have a lasting impact. There may not be a perfect fit, for example, between what you do and what your true purpose is, or what is meaningful purpose to you. And you may not actually make changes to things that are dissonant with who you are, with your passions, with your strengths. Let me address this first path now and make some suggestions as to how you can go about finding purpose in what you do. So it is about examining what you do and asking yourself, what is it about this, about my job or what I'm doing or the direction I'm going in, that really drives me, that I really enjoy, that I really get satisfaction out of? Or what deliberate choices have I made that led me to where I am? So let me give you two examples of individuals who got some insights into their purpose from this and found a greater fit with their purpose in what they do. The first was a manager in an IT company who was in one of my courses in the Diploma in Advanced Management Performance. And he told me how he had drifted from having a really strong sense of purpose, which he had had when he was younger, both as a child and in his teenage years, and then in his chosen course of study in his career. He'd always been into computers and programming. And he'd enjoyed being a software developer because writing and fixing code gave him a huge kick ever since he was very young. But he'd been promoted a number of times, and it had now actually been years since he'd written a line of code. And he felt disconnected from that sense of purpose. He said he still enjoyed many aspects of his job, but he didn't have that feeling of drive. But as he started to reflect, he identified a number of aspects of his job that reconnected him with a feeling of purpose. In particular, the capacity to guide individuals and teams, his team of programmers, for example, and to bridge the comprehension gap between his team and the non-techie end users in his company. Additionally, one of the things he'd said to me initially was that he thought he might be able to renew his sense of purpose as his kids got a little bit older, old enough to get interested in computer programming. But then he had to admit that this was something of a disappointment to him. When they got to that age, they weren't interested in computer programming. They didn't share the same passion as he did. And he didn't want to be like, let's say, one of these crazy sports parents who's trying to force their kid to pursue the dream that they never achieved. But Later on, when he reflected on how can I find purpose, he realized there were other ways he could achieve that. And so he got involved in setting up a coding dojo in his area. The second example is of a university lecturer. She had moved from one institution to another almost like clockwork, almost on cue, exactly every 3 years. And 3 years seemed to be a kind of boredom threshold for her. She was coming up to that point in her current role now, and she had a permanent tenured position. And she expressed her concern to me that now that she was in a tenured position, she really didn't want to find herself in a job that she started to find boring and dull, or to move on and lose that tenure when at a time when she felt, now I need stability in my life for a whole lot of other reasons. So she didn't want to leave, but she didn't want to get bored and stale by staying. So as she reflected on the questions that can help you to find purpose in what you do, she started to think about the classroom experience. And she realized that her approach to lecturing had always been prepare the lectures, make them interesting for the students, and then, you know, maybe renew the material now and again to keep them up to date, make them more interesting for the students. But she realized that she could, to a much greater extent, revitalize her own classroom experience, not just that of her students, and find a renewed sense of purpose in it. Now I can really identify with that one. I've been teaching courses in negotiation, for example, and decision making here at Smurfit for 20 years now, and I still really enjoyed the start of every new term. So there's some suggestions on how we can go down that path of finding purpose in what we do. But now I want to give you some ideas for how you can tackle the bigger question. How can you find your purpose? And what I strongly urge you to do is to develop a statement of purpose. So to my mind, it's not enough just to have a vague sense of purpose. Remember, the important thing in those studies was that the individuals had a strong sense of purpose. Lots of people say to me at the start of the course, oh yeah, I have a sense of purpose, all right, but they can't write it down. So commit, clarify, articulate. A statement of purpose will clarify and strengthen your sense of purpose. It's the best foundation you can have for successful goal setting. It also gives you a solid basis for authentic executive presence. And in the Diploma in Advanced Management Performance, in the module on personal impact and presence, we link purpose with presence and impact. It gives you a compass to guide you in important decisions. Remember, the people in those studies were guided in their decisions by the big goals that they had. And as we've seen, it enables both personal growth and better health. So what will your statement of purpose be? Well, I can't tell you, but I can tell you the characteristics of a good statement of purpose. It should be specific, right? It should be relatively clear about what is this saying about you? What way is this going to drive you? It should be personal. It should be about who you are, and it should resonate with you. I also suggest that if you write a statement of purpose and it seems to be something like it describes your job, or it describes how connected even you are with your family, that may not be sufficient. You could lose your job. I'm not saying you could lose your family, but you were here and you were driven before your family came along. So your sense of purpose has got to be bigger than that. Your sense of purpose might certainly influence how you interact with and raise your family. But it's more than that. It's more than just your job or your family, because you are more than that. So how can you develop this statement of purpose? Well, I can give you some suggested themes that you can reflect on. The first is to reflect on, when do you feel your strongest sense of purpose, or when in life have you felt your strongest sense of purpose? And then to keep asking why. So in other words, you have to take time and go through the hard reflections. So let me give you an example of a typical conversation I've had with some of the people trying to do this. I ask, what gives you a sense of purpose? And the answer might be, well, I have a great sense of purpose when I'm organizing meetings, for example, and getting people together, whether it's at work or with friends or family. Then my job here is easy because I just ask why. And the reflection is, well, I like bringing people together and starting new conversations or reconnecting old ones. Why is that? Because I've always been the most dependable connection in any group I've been involved in, whether it's work or social. Why is that? Because my real skill and joy is actually in involving everyone and creating a community where people really feel together and they realize how close they are and they really belong. And at this point, I can't say when, only the person themselves can say when. In this point, that person may say, now I'm starting to feel a bit closer to a statement of purpose. And you write it down. You're not going to get it all at once, but you have something that really starts to resonate with you. Another question that seems to be helpful for people is this one. What makes you sing your song? Okay, at what point do you feel at your absolute best? But sometimes it's the converse. It's better for people to reflect on challenging life experiences that have shaped them. Some people look back on those experiences and they say, this is what's formed who I am. And for others who are very career oriented, it can be a good starting point by asking, well, why did you make the choices that have led you to this point, to this stage? Okay. So once you've got that far, you're now ready to start refining your statement of purpose. You've got some ideas and you've got to start asking, does it resonate with you? Would someone who really knows you recognize you in this statement? Would it guide you in making difficult choices? Ultimately, this isn't usually something people can do quickly. We actually have to make time for ourselves to reflect. And that's something a lot of us are lacking. One of the things I do on the Diploma in Advanced Management Performance is talk about ways to be more present, to be more aware of the moment, get people to be more mindful. I ask people to do simple things like to go for a walk around our campus at lunchtime, or when we're delivering this online, to go for a walk around their neighborhood at lunchtime, but to do it a little bit differently, leave their phone at home, not to look at it once, and to try and notice new things. So being alone and having the time to reflect is one of the best things that we can do to get closer to our purpose. And now I want to talk about, well, what can you do with your purpose? What's this framework for giving you the big goals? And the framework that I use is called Purpose to Impact Planning. And it's a personal action plan that is built on purpose. So this is very different to starting your year or at any time of the year, giving yourself a list of goals or seeing about some new cool online exercise class and saying, oh, I'd like that. That would be for me. Or hearing that your friend has started something and saying, oh, can I join you? This is founded in your purpose and who you are. And there are three parts to it: your goals, your actions, and your support. But before you start on writing goals, there's one more thing you should do, which is to figure out what areas do you want to address in your plan. So in the Diploma in Advanced Management Performance, the focus is, of course, on business and career. But we cannot separate career truly from other aspects of life. When we talk about, say, work-life balance, it's not about should it be 50-50 or 75-20 or 80-20 or 30-70 or whatever the case may be, because our work and our lives are very strongly interconnected. You simply can't be at your best performance in the workplace, for example, if you're stressed out and unhealthy because of other things. So I take a very wide and holistic approach. There's no point in setting physical health goals, for example, if you feel that the way you're working isn't going to let you achieve them. Or if you're now thinking, oh, when things do get back to normal after the pandemic, I'm not going to have time to do many of these things I would like to do. So what I want you to do is decide, well, what kind of categories of goals do you want to set for yourself? These are not prescriptions, the ones you see on the screen here: career, money, family, leisure, health. You have to decide your own categories, and your sense of purpose will help you to do that. Okay, so each to their own, very much. You'll have your own categories. And then whatever your categories are, the first step is to establish your goals. And I do want you to start with the big long-term goals. Actually, very often people find that that is the easiest thing for them to identify, to think ahead and not be worried about, well, will I be able to do that to achieve it? To think really big about what you want to achieve. And you can go further if you want. You can go beyond 3 to 5 year goals. In my own plan now, I have some 10 and 15-year goals. When you set these goals, you're ready to establish actions. So let's go back for a moment. You narrow down from 3 to 5 years to 2 years, and then to a year. And at the point of setting 1 year goals, you may start to feel, oh, hang on a second, am I going to have to do all of this in a year? And if it looks like a lot, you can always refine. You're going to redraft this plan and figure out what's achievable or what you want to do first. So you've got 1 year goals that are going to drive into your 2 year goals and contribute to your longer term goals. And then below that, rather than calling them goals, I like to call them actions, because we should start thinking about, what do I need to do? And it's easy to break this down into, okay, what will I have done within 180 days? What will I have done within 90 days? And what will I do now? So instead of thinking about the goal and thinking from the start, okay, what do I need to do this week, next week, and so on, and how long is it going to take me to get there? We're thinking in reverse. We're thinking, where do I want to get to, right? And then working back and figuring out what I need to do now. So you always are going to think in the longer term, and you're going to be driven by the big goals, and you're motivated more because you know that everything you do that's in this plan is driving you that little bit closer to a bigger and bigger and bigger goal. There's one rather corny video that I sometimes show in the diploma. It's on YouTube. It's easy to find. I think it's kind of sometimes advertised as a video that broke the internet, but they all say that. And it's of Arnold Schwarzenegger giving a motivational speech, and he talks about how he became Mr. Universe and subsequently a famous actor because he was singularly purpose-driven. He said that every day he went to the gym and every moment he spent in the gym, he was constantly driven by the sense that he was getting closer and closer to his strong sense of purpose. But it doesn't have to be a lonely journey. When you've written your goals and your actions, you may start to feel that, oh, well, look, I've got a lot here to achieve. I've got a lot to bite off. The third part of your purpose to impact planning is figuring out the support that you could use to help you to achieve your goals. So what are the relationships that are going to make it work? They could be just casual or quite formal. So for example, in my plan, one of the areas that I didn't really move on for a couple of years, even though I set goals, was finance, because I realized, yeah, you know, I don't have the expertise. I can't do this for myself. And then probably the third time I got around to revising my purpose to impact plan, I realized I haven't done this bit. What's the support I need? And I enlisted the help of a qualified financial advisor. So you might feel that in some of these areas, that's what you'd like to do. In others, the support could be something like, what could your family or what could your colleagues, what could your boss do to help you to achieve your goals? And of course, this can and should be symbiotic about what can you do to help them achieve their goals. Then how do you make it happen? So you've got this list of actions. And now you're thinking, well, perhaps, okay, how am I going to do all this? And you're going to do it by scheduling and prioritizing. Because you're purpose-driven, you'll know what's important. Right down to in your job, you'll start to figure out, okay, what are the things that I need to do? You know, recently I was talking to somebody about the sort of working from home, and she was telling me that it's very typical for her to log on at say 8 or 8:30 in the morning or 9 in the morning, but to still be online at 10:30 at night because of all the emails that come in and all the things she needs to do and all the meetings that happen in the day. And one of the things she's not doing is prioritizing. And she's not prioritizing because she doesn't have a strong sense of the purpose that she's fulfilling. So we need to define that in our jobs and schedule and prioritize around that. Okay. And then the other thing that really helps is focus. And this is about presence. And we spend a lot of our time in the diploma in advanced management performance, in the module I teach, on how we can develop our presence, be more focused, be more in the moment, get more done with less stress. So really, if we want to enhance our personal impact, it's actually a combination of purpose and presence. So that's a lot to break off. And I started by talking about Quitter's Day. How do we maintain our momentum? Well, we mustn't forget that this is purpose driven. And so we know we've got our plan there. We know that everything we do is going to bring us there, and there will be setbacks. So that's a big part of the secret to success. It's recognizing how to deal with setbacks. I mentioned that, for example, I had one part of my plan, finance, and for 2 years, nothing happened. None of the actions were really done. And that's okay. Cut yourself a break. Do this with self-compassion. In fact, some recent studies have shown that self-compassion is much more valuable in helping you to achieve your goals and be happier than self-discipline. So be self-compassionate in doing all this. And this is what will help to drive you to achieve that purpose. Okay. I'd like to see now if there are any questions.
Thanks so much, Stephen. That's plenty of food for thought, and I think a very energizing webinar for the day that's in it. We have a good few questions here. I see a lot of people are just asking about the sharing of the slides, so I think people probably want to go back and reflect. So just to let everyone know, I will send out the webinar to everyone afterwards, so you can rewatch it or share it with colleagues as you so wish. Let me have a look now at the questions. So I have one here from Mairead. Do you have any examples of an individual's statement of purpose?
Okay, I'll give you my own. That's the fairest thing to do. So my own is, there's always another PB to aim for. Some of you will recognize PB means personal best, not peanut butter, although I do like peanut butter. And what I mean by this is that for me, well, one of my interests, one of my real passions that I didn't have all my life, but I discovered in my early 30s is running. I just love running. And I'm not somebody who goes and runs every day. I run about 3 or 4 times a week, and I'm not especially talented, but I enjoy it. And a lot of the time I go for longer runs and so on. And I was very interested at one stage in running marathons and improving on my personal best. But as I started to reflect on my statement of purpose, I realized that the drive for personal best also informs a lot of how I do lots of other things, whether I'm gardening or cooking a meal, or I want to have a get together with friends. And on top of that, it drives my career in the sense of what I love to do is to help others. That's why I love teaching and training. So that's my statement of purpose. And what I'd add about that is, it might sound totally corny or cheesy to others. And if your statement of purpose sounds totally corny or cheesy to others, that's fine, as long as it resonates with you. It might even sound cliched, but as long as it strongly informs you, and perhaps if you spoke to somebody like your partner or a very close friend and told them what it was, they would say, hey, that's you exactly. Well, then that's a good statement of purpose.
Okay, great. And I think you've sort of answered the question here, but there are a couple of questions on whether your statement of purpose should be more focused on your work life or your home life. But I think the point you're making is it should try and encompass both.
Yeah, so like that example I gave is of my own, it's quite overarching. And I would say the best statements of purpose that I see are very much overarching, that they inform how people go about their lives. It's back to this thing of who they are and how they do things and why. Okay, it's not so much what you do. And you know, it's often a work in progress. So I find sometimes people, some people have drafted it, it's very much maybe about family, and others it's very much just about their job or career. And that's fine. Any purpose will do, but you'll strengthen that statement of purpose if over time you can start to reach deeper or more broadly, as long as it still resonates with you. And by the way, your statement of purpose can and likely will change over time. You know, in those longer term medical studies, looking at people who had a strong sense of purpose, one of the authors points out that your statement of purpose very likely will change over time, that your purpose when you're 75 won't be the same as when you're 25. But I would say for me, for example, the statement of purpose, for mine has kind of done me for quite a good few years, and it still resonates, even though I suspect at this stage, I'm probably not going to beat my personal best in another marathon again. Who knows? I might. But that's okay with me, because there's other ways I define personal best now. Like a few years ago, I started defining that in the context of running as running a marathon without any aches or pains before, during, or after, during the training, during the marathon itself, or afterwards, and doing what it took to get to that stage, so that rather than starting to become more and more compassionate, I'm getting more and more passionate about the running. I'm getting more into just personal best overall in a holistic sense. Hope that makes sense.
Great. And Hannah is just asking, could you repeat the types of questions you should be asking yourself when trying to write your statement of purpose?
Yeah, okay. I mean, you know, there are lots, and you should feel free to frame your own. But I've included here, when do you feel your strongest sense of purpose? So reflect. And I always think here, reflecting in writing is a good idea. Pen and paper, or if you like, pen and tablet, but I'm a good fan of pen and paper. Pen and paper, you know, think about occasions when you felt a really strong sense of purpose, and then ask, why was that? Try and dig into the past. Or think about what makes you sing your song. That was the next question. Or how challenging life experiences have shaped you. Or why, for some people, it's why have I got to the point where I am in my career? What choices, what conscious choices did I make that got me to this point?
Okay, very good. And I have a question here from Kenneth, which I think relates to a little bit what you were talking about presence. Is the ultimate goal the actual journey or the final destination? I say this as a mature student looking back and regretting the amount of todays I missed because I became too obsessed with tomorrows.
Okay, that's Kenneth. That's actually why in the module, I spend a lot of time focusing on presence. Presence is about focus and concentration, but it's actually about being in the moment. And also the reason I like this planning framework is it does have the tomorrow piece, the big goals and the purpose, but also brings that right back to what am I doing today and what should I be doing today? And when you say you're a mature student looking back and regretting perhaps the amount of looking ahead to tomorrows and not really getting too much into today, I would say, you're never really too old to do this. It's never too late to do this. People can and do in their retirement recognize that, God, my purpose was my job and it's been taken away and I don't know what to do. But many of those people actually do succeed then in finding really great meaning and purpose.
Great. And this probably falls on to it, and it's what you mentioned about self-compassion, but how can I get over this disappointment of not achieving my purpose?
Okay. Well, I suppose in a way you could say, to what extent do we ever completely achieve or fulfill our purpose? Our purpose in itself is perhaps I would say not necessarily a goal, as it is, I think this came up earlier, it is in part the journey. And I think that was part of Kenneth's question, or a bit of both. Like when I take mine, there's always another PB to aim for. I've achieved PBs many times over, but I feel driven that way, and I don't know why. But I do. That's very much who I am. And for example, I look out of I'm lucky enough to have a back garden, and I've made it as nice as I can. And I look out and I have a lawn. At this time of year, there's moss growing in it. It's patchy, it's bare. And I know that in the coming months, I'll be doing things to that lawn that will get it into beautiful shape. And by May, June, it's going to be this green, glossy, thick lawn. It's going to look lovely and healthy. And so that's not everyone's cup of tea, but it is for me. And is that then ticked off? No, I don't see purpose as being like a kind of bucket list of things you tick off. To me, that's okay for Instagram, but life isn't really like that, I think. And I don't think we should therefore see a purpose as being unachieved. But I think if we don't have purpose, then we are in danger of, as Oliver Wendell Holmes said, going to our graves with our music unplayed still inside of.
Great. Okay, I'm just conscious of time, so I'll just ask a couple more. There's one person is asking for a book on focus that you could recommend. Do you have it? Or maybe we could send it in the email afterwards if we have a bit. You might have a recommended reading list in general that we could send out with the email.
Yeah, maybe we could do that actually. That's probably not a bad idea. I can't just think of any one particular on hand. I would say though, the single best thing you could do, I'd say rather than getting a book on focus, the single biggest favor to yourself you could do. So in the diploma course, I give people lots of suggested tools that they can use to increase their presence, their focus on the moment, on being in the moment, and to deal with all these things of the day-to-day distractions piling in, or anxiety or negative self-talk. And I categorize these tools into 3 areas: tools for the mind, physical tools for the body, and tools for relationships with other people and interaction with other people. And that in itself, all of those things are kind of an endless journey in a way. But of all of the tools, the one I really exhort people to pick up and try and use is to meditate. And I think meditation is often misunderstood. And I think even it's often portrayed somewhat inaccurately and perhaps sometimes disingenuously. Meditation is really, it's not about achieving some enlightened state or feeling wonderful and blissful or being amazingly grateful and so on. It might have all those effects for you. And if it does, great. But what you're actually doing when you're meditating is you're learning to focus your mind. You're training yourself to focus your mind. I don't meditate every day. I don't even always meditate every week. But there are times when I know, okay, I need to get back to my meditation because it really gives you the power to be able to control your mind. So for example, if you have a dozen things to do, or there are stresses, like I've found in these times since last March, since we had our first lockdown, I've found the practice of meditation, not as a relaxation technique, but as a technique for helping me to focus on what really matters, on what's important. And yes, at times to be grateful for what we have and so on, has been absolutely amazing. So actually, rather than picking up a book or a reading or whatever the case may be, start meditating. Okay, that's the best thing, the best favor you can do yourself.
Great, thank you so much, Stephen. I think we'll leave the questions there. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of them. I think from the level of questions, it shows how much the webinar has resonated with people and made them think. As I said, I'm going to be sharing the webinar again afterwards, so you can have a look back over it and start writing your statement of purpose. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak a little bit about the Diploma in Advanced Management Performance now for those of you who are interested in finding out more. Stephen, I don't know if you can let me take over the controls there or move it on to the next slide.
That's done now. I think you should be able to take it. I can move you on to the next slide if you don't have control there.
Thank you, Stephen. So, just to run over briefly, because our Diploma in Advanced Management Performance is starting on the 11th of February. So we have a few spaces left on it for anyone who would like to apply. As I said, Stephen Boyle is the Programme Director. and it's part of our master's program, part of our MSc in Business and Leadership Management Practice pathway, where when you complete 3 diplomas, you get a master's. It's a part-time program. The first 4 modules are going to be virtual, and then we are hoping to be back in campus in September. So 6 2-day modules from February to October. All the assessments is continuous assessment. So normally what you do is you have some pre-reading before the modules. So you come to the module prepared, and then you'll have an assignment afterwards. As with all our programs, it's for executives who are quite senior in their career. So you need 5 years plus management experience. And you will qualify with a level 8 or level 9 professional diploma qualification from UCD. The fees are $7,945, or if you're a UCD business alumni, you receive a discount of $7,547. You see my contact details there at the bottom. Sorry, I moved on there a little bit quickly. I will also be sending out an email after this webinar, so you'll have my contact details there. So if you have any questions about it. In terms of the modules that you do, you'll see them all listed out, and you'll also see the dates. So you'll have a module you'll be in on a Friday and Saturday. The first day you have an orientation. The first weekend you have an orientation, so you're in on a Thursday as well. And then there's 6 weeks between each module. So the first module is Marketing Strategy for Profitable Growth with Andrew Keating. And then you'll move on to Project Management for Executives with Dr. Garode Hardy, which also includes a virtual site visit. Then you'll be with Stephen Boyle himself for Decision Making for Strategic Execution. You move on to Competitive Advantage through Operations, and then Improving Business Profitability. And as Stephen said, Module 6 is Personal Impact and Presence, which we have been discussing today. This course really, I suppose, Advanced Management Performance is designed for people who have risen up to the ranks of their organization as functional experts. So for example, say you're a sales expert or marketing or finance, and you really want a broader view of the organization for management purposes. So it gives you an insight of all the different parts of the organization and also how your role impacts on them. As I say, it's starting on the 11th of February. So if you are interested, please do get back to me as soon as possible, and I can send you out further details, including the schedule. As I said earlier, we're going to be virtual for the first 4 modules, so that will allow you to be able to do the program from home, and then we'll be back on campus in Smurfit in Blackrock from September, all going well. Just move on to the next slide there. I suppose just to say to you, as I said at the start, this is part of our MSc pathway. And that really is a pathway that allows you to pick and choose 3 diplomas from our list there. So you can really have a niche qualification really focused on your own career at present or your career goals. So as I say, you can start off with the Advanced Management Performance and then move on from there, pick which you'd like to do next. We normally tell people just to pick the first one that they're going to do. Sometimes people have an idea of what the 3 that they'd like to do, but this can evolve over time, depending on what you do as your first module, depending on what happens in your career, the context you make within your class. You might want to stay with some of your classmates. So really it is just about picking your first diploma and then taking it from there. So look, it's just left for me to thank Stephen Boyle so much for his time this morning. I can see from the questions that are still coming in that everyone really enjoyed this webinar and got a lot out of it. As I say, I will send the webinar on to everyone, so please do free to rewatch it and share it with your colleagues, and come back to me if you have any questions, or even if you have any questions for Stephen, I can pass them on. Alternatively, join the Diploma in Advanced Management Performance, where you'll be able to do a whole module on this and really have the time to self-reflect and get a sense of what your purpose is and how that can lead to your career and life goals. All right. Look, thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we will see you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Stephen.